Hi Math 2 students, and welcome to the Factoring Out the Greatest Common Factor Edpuzzle video. So let's go ahead, let's take a look at what this says here. It says the first step to factoring out is to factor out the greatest common factor from each term. All right, so I know we identified the greatest common factor before, but now we're actually going to factor that out. So if you recall, what we can do is break down the terms into their prime factorization and then break down the variables, right? So y to the third is equal to y times y times y, and 12 can be broken down into 2 times 2 times 3. Now, how did they do this? Well, they took 12 and they said, okay, well, 12 is equal to, we'll say 3 and 4 is equal to 2 and 2. And when you're picking the prime factors, you only pick the ones at the end of the line. All right, so you would pick 3, 2, and 2. You would not pick 4 because you did break that one down further. So that's how they got that 12 is equal to 3, 2, and 2. Same thing with 15, right? We could break 15 down. 15 as 5 and 3. Then we could break 6 down, which would just be 2 and 3. All right, and then basically the numbers that you have to choose from are these ones at the end here. And in this case, we had 3 terms. So you had to find the common factors of each term. So if you see here, each of these has a 3, right? Even though 12 and 6 both have 2s, the 15 does not have a 2, so you cannot take that out. So they took out a 3. Then they looked at the variables and they said, well, 12y to the third has 3 y's, 15y squared has 2 y's, and 6y has 1 y. Well, you need to be able to take the same out of all of them. They each have at least 1 y you can take out, so that's why we took a y. All right, and when you do that, you have to factor those terms out of what you had, right? So essentially, I did 12y to the third divided by 3y, and that's how I got my 4y squared. I did negative 15y squared divided by 3y, and I got negative 5y. Did 6y divided by 3y, and I got 2. All right, so once you identify that greatest common factor, you have to go through and actually pull it out of each term. All right, so let's go ahead and try an example. So for the first one, we've got 16p to the 4 and 4p to the third. All right, so let's break 16 and 4 down. So for 16, I'm going to break it down into 4 and 4, which can further get broken down into 2 and 2. All right, I'm going down to the prime factors. Now 4, I can break down into 2 and 2. All right, so you can see that the 16 and the 4 both have 2 2's that we can pull out. All right, so 2 times 2 on the outside. Then we got to figure out how many p's we can take out, right? So my 16 has 4 p's, 1, 2, 3, 4. And my 4 has 3 p's, 1, 2, 3. So we can go through. They have 3 p's in common, right? So I can take a p to the third out. So my greatest common factor here is going to be 4 p to the third. Then I need to go through and get my new terms, right? So I have to do 16 p to the fourth divided by 4 p to the third, all right? And you end up with 4p. Then I'm going to do 4p to the third divided by 4p to the third. This gives you a 1. You have to put something here. Do not leave it blank. Don't just leave it as 4p. The reason you cannot do that is you need to make sure that if you were to distribute this back in, that you would end up with what you started with, right? So you need that 1 as a placeholder, so you do end up with a 4p cubed. All right, so then this would be your answer there. All right. Now, sometimes, and I would like for you to get to the point where you can kind of do this in your head, you might be able to just look at it and say, well, I can tell what the greatest common factor is there. And this one's a little bit easier because they both have the same leading coefficient. They're both a negative 6. So we can actually pull a negative 6 out. Now let's think about the r's, right? The first negative 6 has 5 r's, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The second guy has 4 r's, 1, 2, 3, 4. The most I can take out is going to be 4. So I'm going to get r to the 4th. So then, when I do negative 6, r to the 5th, divided by negative 6, r to the 4th, I get r. When I do negative 6, r to the 4th, divided by negative 6, r to the 4th, you get a plus 1. So this would be your answer. Now keep in mind, you can always check your answer by redistributing. So let's check this answer and make sure we did it right. If I redistribute, I get negative 6 r to the 5th minus 6 r to the 4th, right? And that gives me where I started. So you can always check these distribution answers. That's the nice thing about factoring, is you can literally check all of them just by either, distributing or foiling or multiplying back out. All right, so let's go ahead and try the next example. So we got 14 and 21. Since we have two 21s, we can kind of, treat them the same for the time being. So we got 14, which I'm going to break down into 2 and 7. And then I've got 21, which is going to be 3 and 7. So since, the 21 is there twice, I'm just going to write it out once. That tells me that I can pull a 7 out of both. Then if I look, right, this guy has 1A, this guy has 2 A's, this guy has 3 A's. The most A's I can take out is just 1. So 7A is going to be my greatest common factor. Then I need to get the rest of my term there. So I'm going to do 14A divided by 7A. I get a 2. 21A squared divided by 7A. I get 3A. Then I'm going to do 21A cubed divided by 7A. I get 3A squared. And this would be my answer there. Again, you can check all of these by distributing. You shouldn't get any of these wrong, right? Oh my goodness. All right, so then the last one here, we've got 50, 50, and 20. All right, so let's make a factor tree for 50 and a factor tree for 20. So let's see what we can break 50 down into. We get 10 and 5, and then 5 and 2. I get 4 and 5, and then my 4 can get broken down into 2 and 2. All right, so what would be my common factors, my greatest common factor between 50 and 20? What numbers do these two have in common? Well, it's going to be just it's going to be 1, 5 and 1, 2. All right, so I can take a 5 times 2 outside. Then let's take a look at the p's. This one has 3 p's, this one has 2 p's. This doesn't have any. So since this last term doesn't have any p's, I can't take any p's out. So my greatest common factor is going to be 10. And I'm going to get 5p cubed plus 5p squared minus 2. So for the homework, all you're doing is trying to identify the greatest common factor. All right, so you need to go through and break these down and identify the greatest common factor. Pull it out and then show what you end up with. So once you identify the greatest common factor, you pull that out and then you divide each term by that to get your new expression.